To fund my husband's studies, I secretly sold GU worms at the ghost market. Today, a strange customer came to my stall. He wanted to buy a GU that would make a woman infertile. Though his face was covered, I recognized him at a glance. The man was none other than my husband. Do you have a GU that can make a woman infertile? The man before me wore a Zhong Kuei mask, his voice deliberately lowered to a gruff murmur. It must not harm her health in any way, just render her unable to conceive. He squatted halfway in front of my stall, his back ramrod straight, exuding an air of unmistakable nobility. I blinked in dazed disbelief. Even though the man was wrapped in a black cloak and hidden behind a mask, I would recognize him anywhere. This was my husband, Xie. Shouldn't he be in the academy studying right now? What was he doing at the ghost market? Seeing that I hadn't responded, Xie tone tinged with disappointment. You don't have it. They told me your GU worms are the most potent in the entire ghost market. I suppressed the flood of doubts churning in my heart and nodded at him. I do. Do you want her to be infertile for life, or just for a few years? Xie froze, hesitating for a moment before whispering his answer, for life. But I must stress, under no circumstances is she to be harmed. What was he planning to do with such a malicious GU worm? Was he buying it for a friend? We had been husband and wife for 2 years, sharing every secret, every thought between us. For the first time, I realized I might not know Xie at all. Do you have the woman's birth date and time? Xie paused, tilting his head to study me intently. But I had used a disguise GU, there was no way he could recognize me. Why do you need her birth details to cast the GU? Raising GU worms was a secret art passed down through the generations of my Miao clan. As a native of Chang'an, born and bred, Xie would never understand the intricate rules behind it, so I lied without hesitation. Medicine and GU arts are two sides of the same coin. The infertility GU worms I have here, some are newly bred, others have been nurtured for years. The older ones carry an extremely powerful toxin. I need to know the woman's physical condition to tailor the GU to her. Otherwise, if she is weak and frail, the GU's potency could gravely damage her health. Xie was convinced. Cutting me off in urgent haste, under no circumstances can she be harmed. I mean it, she was born in the year of Jiao Chen, the month of Yi Hai, the day of Gui Wei. She just turned 18, and her health has always been robust, strong as an ox. Jiao Chen year, Yi Hai month, Gui Wei day, that was my birth date. Xie was buying this GU worm, to use against me. The Han people valued bloodline above all else, adhering rigidly to the 3 cardinal guides and 5 constant virtues. Among the 3 greatest acts of unfilial piety, failing to produce an heir was deemed the worst. A woman who could not bear children would even have her home seized by the clan. And yet, in our most intimate moments, he would often rest his hand on my belly, his eyes filled with longing. Yunshi, if only we could have a child. If it's a boy, I'll teach him to read and write, just like me. If it's a girl, I hope she grows up to be as bright and graceful as you. His words echoed in my ears, making me doubt my own eyes. Surely I must have mistaken him for someone else. That was, until a pair of pale, jade-like hands extended before me, holding a sky-blue silk pouch. That pouch, it was the one I had embroidered for Xie, stitched with 2 clusters of xiangfei bamboo, his favorite. Is this enough silver? 2 ingots of fine silver tumbled out of the pouch, their surfaces carved with intricate rui patterns, gleaming in the dim light. Each ingot was worth 50 taels of silver. Xie was always so poor, he could barely make ends meet. Where on earth had he gotten 100 taels? His annual tuition at Bailu Academy alone cost 20 taels. Add in the expenses for ink, paper, brushes, and new clothes for the 4 seasons, and the total came to nearly 40 taels a year. To save money, I grew vegetables in our yard, raised chickens and ducks, and even planned to buy a piglet to raise, seeing how hard I worked. Xie would often bring home books to copy for extra income, but how much money could one make copying books in a year? Desperate, I had no choice but to sneak to the ghost market to sell my GU worms. The Han people feared and loathed women who raised GU. They called us monsters, witches, freaks of nature. If anyone found out my true identity, Xie would be disqualified from the imperial examinations forever. I stared numbly at the silver ingots, mistaking my silence for dissatisfaction. Xieshuren tossed me another pouch. 200 taels. Is that enough now? 200 taels. It was more than 5 or 6 years' worth of our household expenses combined. My face expressionless, I took the silver from his hand and handed him a palm-sized bamboo basket. This is the cold silkworm GU. Keep it in the coldest, shadiest corner of your house. Every midnight, it will lay 1 egg. Steep the egg in water and make her drink it for 3 consecutive nights. After laying 3 eggs, the cold silkworm GU will die naturally. Then you can burn its body to ashes. The cold silkworm GU is extremely potent. Once the woman drinks it, she will never be able to bear children for the rest of her life. Think carefully before you use it. Don't come crying to me later asking to undo the curse. The cold silkworm GU, there is no antidote. Xieshuren clutched the bamboo basket tightly, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. The veins on the back of his hand standing out like writhing green snakes. Once, I had thought his hands were the most beautiful I had ever seen, long, slender fingers, well-defined joints, but now, staring at those bulging veins, I felt as if they were venomous snakes, coiled and ready to strike. To sink their fangs into me at any moment. Xieshuren dropped the silver on my stall, hugged the bamboo basket to his chest, and hurried away. As he stood up, he carefully adjusted his cloak and mask. Taking great pains to avoid being recognized by anyone, I sat on my stool, staring up at his retreating back. For the first time since we'd married, I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to never go home again. I was afraid of what I might find waiting for me there, inside our house. Afraid of finding that bamboo basket. The ghost market opened at midnight and closed at dawn. I picked up my basket of vegetables and walked slowly toward home. From a distance, I could see our front door ajar. Xieshuren stood in the courtyard, sweeping the ground with a bamboo broom, wearing his faded bamboo green scholar's robe. When he saw me, he straightened up, his face breaking into a smile as warm and bright as peach blossoms blooming in the first days of spring. "My wife, you're home. Why did you go to the vegetable patch so early in the morning? It's cold now, and the dew is heavy, you'll catch a chill." He strode over to meet me in 3 quick steps, taking the vegetable basket from my hand with one hand and wrapping the other tightly around my icy fingers. "Your hands are freezing, you must be so cold. Hurry inside to warm up. I made your favorite pear syrup soup." I stared at him, dumbfounded. This was the Xieshuren I knew, the kind, gentle husband I loved. When Miao women turn 16, we are sent out into the world to travel, to search for GU worms. It was on one such journey, in western Sichuan, that I met Xieshuren, who was traveling there to study. He and his classmates had gone mountain climbing and met with an accident. I had saved his life. After that, he'd followed me everywhere like a lost little puppy. Wherever I went, he went too. Later, we married, with heaven as our witness and earth as our matchmaker. In a tiny village shrine dedicated to the god of the land. Miao weddings are not like Han weddings. We don't need matchmakers or elaborate betrothal gifts, or a grand procession with 8 sedan chairs. All we need is a true heart. Xieshuren had told me he was an orphan, raised by his extended clan. I had followed him to Chang'an, settling in a small village just outside the city walls. He had promised me that once he passed the imperial examinations and became a Duran, he would take me back to his clan to meet his relatives. Counting the days, he was due to sit for the exams in just 7 days. "What are you thinking about?" Xieshuren smiled, gently tapping the tip of my nose, his eyes brimming with tender affection so thick it seemed tangible. "Are you tired, my love?" He led me into the house eagerly, pressing me down onto a wooden chair before hurrying to fetch a white porcelain bowl. The pear flesh inside was tender and white, exuding a fresh, sweet fragrance. But beneath that sweetness, I caught a faint, familiar whiff of something else, a faint, metallic tang. It was the smell of the cold silkworm GU, Yunshi. "Drink it while it's hot." I asked Aunt Chen next door to teach me how to make it. "I hope it tastes good." Under Xieshuren's expectant, slightly nervous gaze, I picked up the bowl and took a big gulp. "It's delicious, sweet and fragrant, just like I like it." Xieshuren stared at the half-empty bowl with a complicated expression. then suddenly reached out and snatched it from my hand. Is it getting cold? I'll go heat it up for you again. He carried the bowl to the kitchen in quick, almost clumsy strides, his tall, broad back somehow looking, fleeing. Xieshuren only had 2 days off from the academy every 10 days, but this time, he stayed home for 3 whole days, and for 3 whole days, I drank his pear syrup soup. On the day he left for the exams, he cupped my face in his hands, sighing softly, Yunshi. I'm off to take the exams now, stay home and wait for my good news. Okay, once I become a Duran, you'll be the wife of a Duran scholar. I nodded obediently, leaning against the courtyard gate to watch him walk away, turning back to look at me again and again. For those 3 days, I had not slept a single wink. I just couldn't understand why would Xieshuren do this to me. It wasn't until half a month later that a luxurious, elegant carriage pulled up outside our door. A beautiful young woman, dressed in exquisite silks and jewels, stepped down with the help of her maid, her eyes sweeping over me coldly. So you're the mistress my husband has been keeping outside the city, Jiang Yunshi. I stared at her blankly. Who is your husband? The woman let out a sharp, disdainful laugh, shaking off her maid's hand to seize my chin roughly. Cut the act. My husband is the 3rd young master of the Marquis Xie's mansion, Xieshuren. The richly dressed woman was Yi Wanqing, the daughter of the Minister of Revenue. The Xieshuren she spoke of, the 3rd young master of Marquis Xie's mansion, was a far cry from the poor, penniless scholar I had married. They were both children of wealthy, powerful families, perfectly matched, a match made in heaven. The pearl in her hairpin was as big as a longan, glinting so brightly it made my eyes sting, a sharp pain piercing my heart. Standing beside Yi Wanqing was a small, delicate maid, wearing a bright crimson pomegranate skirt and a gold bracelet inlaid with rubies on her wrist. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe, filled with unbridled contempt. Finally lingering on the plain silver bracelet on my wrist, she let out a shrill, mocking giggle, covering her mouth with a silk handkerchief. Madam, I told you you were worrying for nothing. Look at her, what kind of person is she? Just a country bumpkin with mud on her feet. You didn't even need to come here in person to fetch her. This lowly creature is so unlucky. She's not even worthy of carrying your shoes. Everyone knows our 3rd master is the most generous man in the city. That silver bracelet on her wrist. Even the scullery maids in our mansion wouldn't be caught dead wearing something so tacky. You can rest easy now, madam. Bring her back to the mansion, keep her like a pet dog, amuse yourself with her when you're bored, and kick her to the curb when you're tired of her. The maid's thin lips fluttered, her voice clear and loud, echoing through the quiet courtyard. Yi Wanqing's sharp, icy gaze softened, her entire body relaxing as a smug smile tugged at her lips. She patted the maid's hand affectionately. You clever little thing, your eyes are as sharp as ever. Enough of this nonsense. My husband is waiting at home. Hurry up and get her into the carriage, let's leave at once. At her command, 2 burly old women immediately stepped forward, seizing me by the arms, one on each side, and began dragging me roughly toward a carriage parked behind them. What are you doing? Let go of me. The women's grip was like iron clamps. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't break free. Seeing my resistance, Yi Wanqing's face darkened with anger. Cut the act. My husband isn't here to see your fake reluctance. A lowly peasant girl like you, how dare you put on airs in front of me? I truly was having the worst luck today. That morning, I'd slipped and fallen while gathering herbs in the mountains. I'd just gotten home and finished bathing when Yi Wanqing and her entourage showed up at my door. Normally, whenever I left the house, I carried at least a dozen different types of GU worms on my person for protection. But today, aside from my lifebound GU, I only had 2 or 3 small, harmless GU worms with me. If things turned ugly, I wouldn't even be able to defend myself. Though I hadn't read many books, I'd heard people say it often enough. Once you marry into a noble family, it's like drowning in a bottomless sea. I absolutely could not let them drag me into that mansion so easily. Help! Someone help! They're kidnapping me. I don't know any of you. Let me go right now. Xieshuren and I lived at the foot of the mountain, at the very end of the village. I'd always loved our little courtyard. It was quiet, secluded, far away from the other villagers, perfect for raising my GU worms in peace. But now, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. I screamed at the top of my lungs for what felt like an eternity, but not a single villager came to my rescue. The little maid, annoyed by my shouts, rolled up her sleeves and ran forward, slapping me hard across the face. "You two useless old hags, what are you waiting for? Gag her mouth shut this instant," scolded by the maid. The two women only tightened their grip on me, their actions growing even more brutal. One of them pulled a foul-smelling cloth from her pocket and stuffed it roughly into my mouth, while the other produced a length of rope and tied my hands tightly behind my back. Then, like I was nothing more than a sack of potatoes, they hoisted me up between them and dumped me unceremoniously onto the floor of the carriage, slamming the door shut behind them with a loud bang. My head hit the corner of the carriage wall with a sharp thud. The pain was so intense that my vision went black, and it took me a long while to catch my breath. Giddy up. The carriage wheels rumbled forward, jostling me violently. I closed my eyes and huddled in the corner, feigning unconsciousness, not moving a muscle. "Madam Zhao, do you think we were too rough with her?" One of the old women prodded me with her foot. Seeing that I still didn't move, she sounded a little flustered. "She's the third master's first concubine. After all, what if something happens to her?" Madame Zhao let out a scoff of disdain, her voice dripping with contempt. "Madame Liu, you're far too timid for your own good. If the third master truly cared about her, would he have kept her cooped up in this hovel? Not even bothering to hire her a single maid to help with the chores. Look at what she's wearing, this coarse, ragged cloth. Even the lowliest scullery maid in our mansion dresses better than she does. And besides," Madame Zhao lowered her voice conspiratorially, leaning in closer to the other woman. I heard it from one of the old matron's personal maids. She cleared her throat before continuing. "This little mistress of his, she's damaged goods. She can't bear children, otherwise. With how strict the old madam is about rules and propriety, do you think she would ever have agreed to let the third master bring a mistress into the mansion?" Madame Liu let out a gasp of shock. "What, she can't have children?" Madame Zhao nodded emphatically. "The third master made it perfectly clear he will never let this woman threaten our third mistress's position as the legitimate wife. There will never be any illegitimate sons or daughters born to disrupt the family hierarchy. Besides, now that the third master has passed the imperial examinations and become a Duran, the old madam is in a good mood. That's why she finally gave her permission for him to bring this mistress home." Madame Liu let out a sigh of relief, her voice suddenly light and amused. "Oh, Madame Zhao, you always know far more than the rest of us. Being the third mistress's personal attendant, a concubine who can't have children, what kind of future could she possibly have, when she's young? She might be able to use her looks to flirt with the master, but once she's old and wrinkled, she'll end up living a life worse than a maid." Madame Zhao preened under the praise, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. "Exactly. Our third mistress is just too kind-hearted. She insisted on coming here in person to fetch this woman." Their conversation soon drifted away from me, turning to gossip about Xie Shuren and Yi Wanqing. The man they described, gentle, affectionate, thoughtful, sounded like my husband, and yet, at the same time, he didn't sound like him at all. It turned out that Xie Shuren and Yi Wanqing had been married for 4 years now. In their 3rd year of marriage, Yi Wanqing had suffered a miscarriage, losing a 5-month-old son. Grief-stricken, Xie Shuren couldn't bear to stay in the mansion any longer. That was why he'd left to travel and study. I lay on the floor of the carriage, my body going numb, perhaps from the tightness of the rope binding my hands. I felt as if I'd fallen into an ice cave, a bone-deep chill creeping through my veins, spreading to every corner of my body. Maybe they had made a mistake. The Xie Shuren they were talking about, he wasn't my husband. My husband Xie Shuren was a poor, struggling scholar. He'd fallen in love with me at first sight, swearing he would never marry anyone else but me. He wasn't some spoiled young master who never lifted a finger to help with anything. He helped me feed the chickens and ducks. He copied books to earn extra money for our household. He even cooked for me sometimes, making me a bowl of sweet, clear pear soup with his own hands. He'd promised me that once he became a Duran, he would take me to meet his clan relatives. Become a Duran. He became a Duran. That's right. Xie Shuren had passed the examinations. Splash. A cup of cold tea was suddenly thrown in my face, jolting me awake. I opened my eyes to find myself staring into a pair of cold, sunken, elderly eyes. Now that you're in the Marquis' mansion, you'd better learn to obey our rules and behave yourself. If you dare to open your mouth and spout nonsense, or offend any of the masters and mistresses, I swear I'll skin you alive. After being dragged out of the carriage, Madame Liu summoned a small, plain blue sedan chair for me. The Marquis' mansion was far larger than I had ever imagined. I sat in that sedan chair for what felt like an eternity, being carried through one towering gate after another, jostled so violently that I nearly vomited, before finally arriving at a secluded courtyard filled with blooming magnolia trees. A group of maids and old women were already waiting for me there. As soon as I stepped out of the sedan chair, they swarmed around me, pushing me roughly into the house. They forced me to change out of my coarse clothes into a gaudy silk dress, painting my face with thick layers of powder and rouge. I stared at my reflection in the bronze mirror, a woman dressed in clothes that were far too fancy, her face covered in makeup so heavy it felt like a mask. I barely recognized myself. Once they had finished dressing me up, the maids filed out of the room one by one. A moment later, the intricately carved wooden door was pushed open, and a familiar voice echoed through the room as its owner stepped inside. Xieshuren was wearing a luxurious silk robe embroidered with intricate patterns, a jade crown perched atop his head. He exuded an air of noble elegance, a side of him I had never seen before. Yunshi, it's been so long, have you missed me? I thought to myself, Xieshuren would have been better off dead. At least then, he could have died at a time when I still believed he loved me. Instead of standing before me now, wearing a face that was both familiar and utterly foreign, with the identity of the third young master of the Marquis' mansion, and as Yi Wanqing's husband, Xieshuren stepped forward, reaching up to pluck a golden hairpin from my hair. These gaudy things don't suit you. You're far more beautiful without any makeup at all, pure and elegant, like a lotus flower untouched by the mud. Yunshi, I never meant to lie to you. I love you too much. Can you understand my feelings? Xieshuren took my hand in his, pressing it against his chest. I could feel the warmth of his body seeping through the silk of his robe, the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my palm. Yunshi, at long last, we can finally be together forever. Yunshi, I'm so happy. I pulled my hand away from his, stepping back, and tilted my chin up, staring at him with cold, unblinking eyes. Xieshuren, I will not be your concubine. Xieshuren froze, then let out a soft sigh, looking at me with a pained expression. Yunshi, don't be so greedy. Yi Wanqing's father is the Minister of Revenue, and her mother is the daughter of the Marquis of Anbei. Her family background is far beyond yours. The fact that she's even willing to let you enter this mansion is already a huge concession on her part. You have my word, even though you're only a concubine in name right now. My mother has promised me that once I pass the next level of the examinations and become a jinsha, she will grant you the title of an official concubine. I had heard people talk about this before. There were many different ranks of concubines in noble families: legal wives, noble concubines, official concubines, and then there were the lowly bed servants, the lowest of the low. Official concubines were recorded in the family registry. Even the legal wife couldn't arbitrarily beat them, kill them, or sell them off. But bed servants, though they were technically considered masters, were often treated worse than the most respected maids and old women in the mansion. How dare Xieshuren expect me to be his concubine? Was it just because I loved him? My cold, unforgiving gaze seemed to sting him. He reached out to grab my hands again, his voice growing urgent, almost desperate. Yunshi, I promise you I will never let anyone bully you. I specially chose this courtyard for you. It's far away from the main compound, so you won't have to deal with Yi Wanqing or the others very often. If you don't like the maids and old women assigned to you, I'll send them all away. We can live here just like we did in the village, raise chickens and ducks together, plant a vegetable garden, just the two of us. Yunshi, you have no idea, those days I spent with you in that little village courtyard were the happiest days of my entire life. It was the first time I had ever heard Xieshuren talk so much. He told me that he had never loved Yi Wanqing, not even for a single day. He had married her only to fulfill his duty to the Xie family, to obey his parents' wishes. Not a single part of that marriage had been for himself. He said that I was the brightest, most dazzling ray of light in his life. He told me that while he loved reading books, he hated the imperial examinations. Hated the idea of becoming an official and getting tangled up in the dirty politics of the imperial court. What he truly longed for, he said, was the simple, quiet life of a farmer and his wife, working in the fields at sunrise, returning home at sunset, turning every ordinary day into a beautiful, timeless pastoral poem. Yi Wanqing, he said, was the harsh, unavoidable reality he had been forced to accept. But me, I was the life he had always dreamed of. Truly, scholars were such skilled liars. No wonder people said that a scholar's tongue was sharper than any sword or blade. It could kill not just a person's body, but their heart and soul as well. I wondered what Yi Wanqing would think if she heard him say these things. Xie Shuren, you really want me to live here with you? Xie Shuren's eyes suddenly lit up with hope, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips, spreading across his face. Yunqi, does this mean you've forgiven me? I promise you, I will treat you like a precious treasure for the rest of my life. We Miao women are clear in our love and hate. When we love someone, we wish for them to live a long and happy life. When we hate someone, we wish for them to die a painful death. And the one thing we can never, ever forgive is betrayal and lies. Xie Shuren, you will regret this, I promise you that. Xie Shuren pulled me into his arms, sighing contentedly, as if he already had the whole world in his grasp. Yunqi, with you by my side, I have everything I could ever want. My hand rested lightly against his chest, over his heart. Then, would you be willing to give me your heart? Among the many types of GU worms, there is one called the heart-eating GU. It is as thin as a strand of silk, able to crawl into a person's body through their skin, burrowing straight into their heart. Once inside, it will build a nest there, laying its eggs, feeding on the very flesh and blood of the heart. As the GU worm grows larger day by day, the person infected will suffer excruciating pain every single day, like their heart is being chewed and gnawed away piece by piece until their heart is completely devoured, and they die a slow, agonizing death. Xie Shuren chuckled softly, the vibrations of his laughter rumbling in his chest against my hand. Silly girl, my heart has always belonged to you. He had put on a special fragrance today, a faint, clean, refreshing scent that filled my nostrils. It smelled like snow-capped mountains in the dead of winter, like the crisp, pine-scented air of an early morning forest. Though Xie Shuren was a scholar, he had studied martial arts for several years. His body was lean, but there was a quiet strength and solidity to it. What a pity. Would you like me to continue translating the next part of this story for you? Or would you prefer to adjust the tone of the translated text to be more dramatic for social media promotion? This face, this body, they're exactly what I've always loved the most. I lowered my hand and wrapped my arms around his waist, burying my head in his chest. Xie Shuren, what am I going to do with you? I'm almost a little reluctant to let you die so quickly. Third master, something's happened to third mistress. The little maid who'd been with Yi Wanqing came rushing in, a gust of cold wind sweeping in behind her. Catching sight of us locked in an embrace, she dropped to her knees with a thud. Her head bowed so low she dared not look up. Third mistress's migraine has flared up again. She's in terrible pain. Xie Shuren pulled away from me, his brows furrowing into a deep frown. Fate Sui, you're getting more and more reckless with your manners. So her name was Fate Sui. She was quite pretty, I supposed. And her slap had certainly stung like hell. Third master, mistress has fainted from the pain. You must come at once. Xie Shuren glanced at me, a look of obvious dilemma crossing his face. After a long pause, he reached out and stroked my cheek gently. Stay here and wait for me, my love, I'll be right back. Fate Sui scurried after Xie Shuren, but not before shooting me a triumphant, provocative smirk over her shoulder. The wind outside was howling. I closed the door and leaned back against the carved wooden daybed. Finally taking a moment to look around the room properly, it was magnificent, opulent beyond anything I could have imagined, far grander than our little cottage in the mountains, 100 times over. But it was also far too big, empty, and achingly lonely. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the same hollow emptiness there as I did in this room. Why do men always love to lie? Mistress, I've brought your meal. My moment of melancholy didn't last long. A maid with slanted, fox-like eyes pushed the door open, carrying a food box in her hands. Her name was Dooku. She told me she would be my personal maid from now on. As Dooku set the dishes out on the table, her eyes lingered on me, taking me in from head to toe in a way that was far from subtle. There was a plate of pickled vegetables, a bowl of millet porridge, and a single yellowish corn bun. The bun even had a row of faint bite marks on it, like it had been snatched right out of someone's mouth. Noticing that I was staring at the meager meal in silence, Dooku smiled sweetly, as if she were doing me a great kindness. Third mistress has a heart of gold. You know, she was worried that rich, greasy food might upset your stomach after living in the countryside for so long. She specially ordered this plain, simple fare to help you adjust gradually. She didn't want you to suffer from acclimatization. Third mistress is truly a saint. There's no one kinder or more considerate than her. Oh, and I heard that third mistress's migraine flared up badly this morning. Third master was so worried. He's been by her side in the main courtyard, personally feeding her medicine himself. The maids in the Xie mansion certainly had a way with words, all sharp tongues and honeyed lies, but I was used to quiet. I didn't like all this noise and drama in my courtyard. Seeing that I still wasn't saying anything, just staring down at the table with my head bowed, Dooku's smile faltered. A flicker of impatience crossing her face. Mistress, according to the rules of the mansion, you have to go pay your respects to third mistress tomorrow morning and offer her tea. Being a country bumpkin, I suppose you don't know the first thing about proper etiquette. Don't worry, though, I'll teach you everything tonight. We won't go to bed until you've mastered the art of serving tea properly. Dooku sat chattering away for a quarter of an hour before finally standing up and clearing the untouched dishes from the table. Then she stepped outside and called out loudly. Two burly, muscular old women immediately filed into the room. One was holding a whip. The other was carrying a wooden box filled with rows of silver needles, glinting coldly in the light. Mistress, let's begin. Dooku's eyes were practically sparkling with excitement. The two old women looked equally eager. Rubbing their hands together like they couldn't wait to start, I touched the two tiny GU worms hidden on my person, letting out a soft sigh. Fine. Discretion was the better part of valor. That night was pure torture. Dooku and the two old women made me practice walking and kneeling with a bowl of water balanced on my head, threatening to stab me with the silver needles every time I so much as wobbled. I bit down on my lip, enduring it all in silence. Refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry or beg for mercy, we stayed up like this until the early hours of the morning, when even the two old women could no longer keep their eyes open, swaying on their feet with exhaustion. Dooku propped her chin up in her hand, sitting on a chair and nodding off every few seconds, nearly face-planting onto the floor from drowsiness. Finally, seeing that my face was ashen and I could barely stand, she waved a hand dismissively. Fine. That's enough for tonight. You've learned the gist of it. Go to bed, mistress, and don't forget to get up at dawn to pay your respects to third mistress. I collapsed onto the bed, my body aching all over, my legs feeling like they didn't belong to me anymore. I was so tired, so hungry. It felt like I'd only just closed my eyes when the sky began to lighten outside. Dooku was already standing beside the bed when I woke up, holding a pale pink dress in her hands, following my gaze to the dress. She pressed her lips together in a mocking smile. According to the rules, since today is your first full day in the mansion, you have to go pay homage to the mistress. I suppose you didn't know this, but concubines aren't allowed to wear bright red, and as a lowly bed servant, well, your status is even lower than a regular concubine, so this dress of yours can only have a tiny hint of red in it. That's all you're permitted. Life in this wealthy mansion was truly tedious. Everyone spoke with a double tongue, smiling to your face while secretly wishing they could tear you to pieces behind your back. No wonder Xie Shuan had hated staying here. Who would want to wake up every morning to a house full of masks? But if he hated it so much, why did he have to drag me into this mess with him? Dooku's movements as she combed my hair were anything but gentle. When she'd finished with my hair, She slathered thick layers of powder and rouge all over my face. Paying no mind to my protests, my once fair skin was now caked in a heavy layer of leaden powder, so thick I felt like it would crack and crumble off if I so much as spoke. My lips were painted a garish, blood-red color, making me look like some kind of man-eating monster. Staring at my heavily made-up reflection in the mirror, I thought to myself I looked exactly like the old madam of a brothel. Dooku nodded in satisfaction, stifling a yawn as she grabbed my arm to haul me to my feet. Hurry up. Mistress, we dare not keep third master and third mistress waiting. The sky was only just beginning to brighten, and the dress Dooku had given me was paper-thin, offering no protection against the morning chill. Standing on the veranda outside the main courtyard, I shivered as the wind cut through the fabric of the dress, seeping into my bones. It was so cold. The sky grew brighter and brighter, and finally, there was movement inside the room. Fei pulled back the curtain and saw me standing there, letting out a gasp of mock surprise before gesturing at Dooku with her chin. You little rascal, you've outdone yourself. Dooku winked at her playfully. Don't worry, sister, I did everything exactly as you told me to. The curtain was pulled back fully, and a wave of warm air washed over me, making my eyes flutter shut for a moment. Before I could even regain my bearings, Dooku gave me a rough push from behind, sending me stumbling into the room. Someone jabbed me hard in the back of the knees. The next thing I knew, I was falling to the floor, forced to my knees. Yi Wanqing and Xie Shuren were sitting side by side on the daybed, looking for all the world like a loving, devoted couple. Xie Shuren's eyes widened when he saw my face, a look of clear displeasure crossing his features. What on earth have you done to yourself? Why are you made up like that? Dooku immediately dropped to her knees in a deep curtsy, jumping in to answer before I could open my mouth. I think mistress was just so dazzled by all the jewels and finery in the mansion that she got a little carried away. Third master, and all those pots of powder and rouge, she couldn't resist putting them all on her face at once. I tried to stop her, but I simply couldn't. Xie Shuren's face darkened instantly. Yi Wanqing reached out and squeezed his hand, shooting him a playful, reproachful look. Husband, that's not fair of you. I'm sure you must have neglected her terribly when you were living in the countryside, which is why she's acting like this, like a child who's never seen anything nice before. Xie Shuren studied me for a moment, then turned his head away, his face twisted with distaste. Enough of this nonsense. Stop kneeling there and hurry up and offer me my tea. I tilted my chin up, staring straight at him. I've been forced to kneel all night by your maids. My hands and feet are numb. I can't lift them to pour the tea. Dooku. Yi Wanqing's delicate eyebrows shot up in anger, and she opened her mouth to scream only for Xie Shuren to cut her off, placing a hand on her arm. Wanqing, I trust the way you've trained your servants. Now that she's entered this mansion, she must learn to abide by our rules. Yi Wanqing broke into a bright smile, her eyes crinkling with delight as she leaned into Xie Shuren's side. Thank you for understanding me, husband. The two of them locked eyes, their hands intertwined, looking at each other like there was no one else in the world. I stared at them, completely baffled. What was Xie Shuren playing at? He'd gone to all this trouble to get me into the mansion. Was it just so he could make me watch him and his wife being all lovey-dovey together? Because I refused to serve Yi Wanqing tea. Xie Shuren punished me by ordering me to stay confined to my courtyard for 3 days to reflect on my mistakes. I hadn't eaten anything since the night before. By evening, I was so hungry my stomach was growling loud enough to wake the dead. I'd known the Xie mansion would be a hard place to live, but I'd never imagined they'd actually starve me. I was just about to sneak out of the courtyard to find something to eat when the door opened, and there stood Xie Shuren. As soon as he saw me, he rushed forward and pulled me into his arms, his voice thick with genuine concern. Yunshi, my poor girl, you've been suffering so much. They always say women are fickle, but I was starting to think men were even worse. Xie Shuren pulled a silk handkerchief out of his sleeve and gently wiped all the heavy makeup off my face, his touch soft and tender. There, that's better. You're so much more beautiful like this, natural, unadorned. I know you've never cared for all those gaudy jewels and powders. Did you dress up like that this morning just to make me angry? You little minx. Wanqing is my legal wife. After all, you need to show her the respect she deserves. Do it for me, please." The only response I could give him was the loud, embarrassing gurgling of my empty stomach. When he realized I hadn't eaten anything all day, the tenderness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, hard look of disappointment. "Yunchi, are you trying to manipulate me by starving yourself? Why can't you see how much I'm doing this for you? Only if you show Wanching the proper deference will she stop picking on you. I'm doing everything I can to protect you, why can't you understand that?" The man standing in front of me was a complete stranger, so much so that I felt like I was trapped in some kind of bizarre dream. The gentle, smiling man who used to do everything he could to make me happy, was he just a figment of my imagination? "Be good, eat something, and put all those gaudy trinkets away. Don't dress up like that again. I don't like it." Xieshuan told me to eat something, but he hadn't brought any food with him. After lecturing me for a good long while, he ordered me to go and pay my respects to Yi Wanqing again in 3 days' time. He said he hoped I'd be willing to endure a little bit of hardship for him. He also said that Yi Wanqing was a lady of noble birth, raised with the finest morals. She would never truly mistreat me. At most, he said, she'd just throw a few tantrums. I stared at the man in front of me, and suddenly I thought the heart-eating Jiyu wasn't nearly cruel enough for him. Before Xieshuan left, I reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his robe. "Can I go back to our old cottage tomorrow? I started making a silk pouch for you a while ago. I want to finish embroidering it. After I come back from the cottage, I promise I'll go and pay my respects to third mistress properly." It was such a trivial little request to him. He agreed without a moment's hesitation, a relieved smile spreading across his face. Xieshuan left my courtyard in a much better mood than when he'd arrived. Dooku, however, was in a foul temper. She twisted her silk handkerchief in her hands, glaring at me with pure venom in her eyes. "You certainly know how to wrap men around your little finger, don't you? You're confined to your courtyard for punishment, and yet you still managed to get third master to come running to see you. They all say you're just a country bumpkin, but I think you're more like a whore from the brothel district. The way you seduce men, even the most experienced courtesans couldn't hold a candle to you." I was too hungry to argue with her, too weak to even lift my head. Dooku ranted and raved for a while longer, but when she realized I wasn't going to respond, she let out a huff of frustration and stormed out of the courtyard, slamming the door behind her. It was obvious she'd gone to tattle to Yi Wanqing. Let her. Tomorrow, I'd be going home anyway. The old woman sent to accompany me back to the village was none other than Madame Liu, the same one who'd dragged me to the Xie mansion in the first place. She shot me a sideways glance, letting out a cold snort through her nose. "Mistress, don't blame this old servant for being blunt. This village is miles away from the Xie mansion. If you dilly-dally any longer, the mansion gates will be locked for the night." I slid the silver bracelet off my wrist and pressed it into her palm without a word. Though it was only silver, the craftsmanship was exquisite, carved with clusters of magnolia blossoms, so lifelike they looked like they might bloom at any moment. Elegant and refined, this bracelet had been Xieshuan's betrothal gift to me. He'd said I was just like a magnolia blossom, pure, elegant, untainted by the dust of the world. Madame Liu weighed the bracelet in her hand, a flash of greed lighting up her eyes. "Hurry along then, mistress, we haven't got all day." She wasn't a meow woman. She had no idea that gifts given by a GU master were never to be accepted lightly. After tucking every GU worm I owned safely onto my person, I lit the stove, boiled some water, and made myself a bowl of egg noodles. I slurped down every last drop of the broth, then patted my stomach in satisfaction. A full belly made for a clear head and a sharp mind made for easy work. When I returned to the Xie mansion, Dooku's attitude was strangely different. No longer did she roll her eyes at me, or hurl snide remarks my way. Instead, she would stare at me from time to time, lost in thought. Her gaze was odd, 3 parts schadenfreude, 3 parts jealousy, 3 parts vindictive glee, and even 1 part pity. It sent a chill down my spine, making my skin crawl with discomfort, but I didn't have to wait long to find out why she'd been looking at me like that. That night, I heard a rustling sound outside my window. A shadowy figure slipped into the room through the window, reeking of knockout incense. "Come on, little beauty, don't hide from me." The man was burly, his arms bulging with muscles. He pinned me down on the bed before I could even react, leaving me with barely any room to fight back. Lucky for me, I had plenty of GU worms hidden on my body. As he fumbled with my clothes, I seized the chance to slip a handful of red bean GU onto his arm. The red bean GU was a new type of GU I'd developed recently, tiny as red beans. They loved to burrow under human skin. Wherever they crawled, they left a trail of sticky slime in their wake, a slime that caused an itch so unbearable, the victim would scratch until their skin was raw and bleeding. The man's eyes lit up when he caught sight of my exposed shoulder. He leaned down, ready to bite, when his body suddenly went rigid. He hissed through his teeth, clamping his lips shut, his veins bulging on his forehead. Damn it! Cursing, he jumped to his feet, scratching his arm like a madman. He'd been in such a hurry earlier that he'd already stripped off his shirt. Now, standing half naked in the middle of the room, he looked like he'd lost his mind. His tanned skin was soon crisscrossed with bloody scratch marks. Red bean GU were restless creatures. They loved to crawl all over the body, especially at night, when they were most active. The only time they ever stopped moving was when they were ready to lay their eggs. Then, you could feel a small, hard lump forming under the skin. Itch. It itches like hell. The more he scratched, the more frantic he became. In the blink of an eye, there wasn't an inch of unmarked skin left on his chest and arms. Mistress, did you call for help? Someone help. There's a man in Mistress's room. A crowd of maids and old women had been lying in wait outside the door. At the sound of Dooku's shrill cry, they swarmed into the room. Some rushed to light the candles. Others ran off to fetch the master. Oh my goodness, mistress, how could you do this to Third Master? You've brought shame to the entire Xie mansion. Dooku was quick to pin the blame on me, but as she finished speaking, she suddenly realized something was wrong. The other maids and old women were staring at her, then at the man scratching himself like a lunatic, their faces blank with confusion. Madame Liu stepped forward, then suddenly let out a loud shriek. Oh my God, that's Zhong-san, the carriage driver. Zhong-san was the one who brought Mistress back to the mansion earlier. She kept staring at him on the ride back. I never thought in just a few days she'd do such a thing with him. Truly, older servants were the most reliable in a crisis. The younger maids were all too stunned to speak. Even Dooku was standing there, dumbfounded. Only Madame Liu had remembered her mission at this critical moment. But her words sounded completely out of place now, because Zhong-san looked absolutely terrifying, not like a man who'd come to tryst with a lover, but like a man possessed by evil spirits. He screamed and scratched at his face, as if trying to tear his own flesh off. Madame Liu, help me, it itches so bad. Madame Liu stamped her foot, grabbing Dooku's sleeve in panic. What do we do? Third Master and Third Mistress will be here any minute. Dooku's eyes darted back and forth. She pointed at two other old women, ordering them to restrain Zhong-san. Knock him out, quick. By the time Xie arrived, his face thunderous with rage, Zhong-san was already trussed up like a pig and thrown on the floor. I'd been pinned down too, forced to kneel beside him. My torn dress lay discarded on the floor, an incriminating piece of evidence, looking more than a little suggestive. Xie glared at me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. After a long, tense silence, he turned to Dooku, his voice trembling with fury. Tell me, what the hell is going on here? Speak the truth. Not a single word omitted. Yuanqing patted his back gently, her voice full of fake concern. Husband, don't let your anger get the better of you. It's bad for your health. The schemes of women in the inner courtyard were always the same, predictable, tedious, and yet, men always fell for them. It was truly baffling. Zhong-san was plain-looking, his features unremarkable. Why on earth would I have an affair with him? Xie had always seemed like an intelligent man. Could he really believe such a blatant lie? Woo, woo woo. Dooku cleared her throat, ready to speak only to freeze in shock when she realized she couldn't form a single word. Her tongue was swelling up rapidly, growing so big she couldn't even close her mouth. From a distance, it looked like she had a huge pink lump stuffed in her mouth. Yuanqing wrinkled her nose in disgust. Get out of my sight. You're making me sick. Madame Liu, you were guarding the courtyard door this whole time. You tell me what happened. Dooku scrambled to her feet in a panic, backing away to the corner. her eyes wide with terror. She'd been infected with my swollen tongue Gu. Her tongue would keep swelling, growing bigger and bigger until there was no room left in her mouth, not even enough to swallow saliva. The victim felt no pain, no itching, but they couldn't eat, couldn't drink. It was like having their mouth stuffed full of cotton. Madame Liu seemed to sense something was wrong. She shot me an uneasy glance. I saw them, mistress, when this old servant entered the room. Zhong-san and the concubine were rolling around on the bed together. Yi Wanqing clapped a hand over her mouth in feigned shock, then slammed her palm down on the table, jumping to her feet. How dare you, Zhong-san? How dare you lay your filthy hands on concubine Jiang? Guards, drag him out and beat him to death. As for concubine Jiang, husband, it was all Zhong-san's doing. He must have forced himself on her. She's innocent, I'm sure of it. Xieshuren said nothing. His eyes were dark and stormy as he stared at the torn white undergarment on the floor. In that moment, I finally understood why Yi Wanqing had chosen this particular scheme to frame me. Whether Xieshuren believed it or not, in his eyes, my purity was already stained. Even if it had been against my will, my body had been seen, touched by a lowly carriage driver. This incident would become a thorn in his heart, a thorn that could never be pulled out, only growing deeper and more painful with time. Sure enough, Xieshuren took a deep breath, then waved a hand to dismiss all the kneeling maids and old women from the room. Soon, even Zhong-san was dragged away, leaving only the two of us alone. He stared at me, his gaze intense, his voice hoarse with emotion. Yunshi, why did Zhong-san target you? Did you say something to him? Did you lead him on? Didn't I tell you not to smile at other men? I pulled the cloth out of my mouth, looking at him with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. So, Xieshuren actually thought I'd seduced Zhong-san first. Xieshuren closed his eyes, his face twisted with pain. Why can't you just be obedient? Why can't you just behave? I spoil you, treat you like a precious treasure, and this is how you repay me. I used to hate reading romance novels where the characters never spoke their minds. The young masters and ladies would let small misunderstandings fester, letting their suspicions grow, never bothering to explain themselves. But now, I suddenly understood why they stayed silent. There was simply nothing left to say. Life in the Xie mansion was truly tedious, and Chang'an was no better. I missed home, I missed the mountains, missed the quiet. Xieshuren confined me to my courtyard again. This time, for a full month. But this time, my days were much easier than before, because Duku, Madame Liu, and even Yi Wanqing had all fallen ill. Duku lay in bed for 3 days, her tongue swollen to twice its normal size, unable to eat or drink. She was barely clinging to life, her breathing shallow and labored. The mansion had summoned countless physicians, but none of them could diagnose her strange illness. Madame Liu, meanwhile, was struck with a severe case of diarrhea. She spent hours on end in the outhouse, unable to leave. At her age, 2 days of constant purging left her too weak to even get out of bed. But the worst off was Yi Wanqing. Her face and body were covered in pus-filled boils, making her look like a giant toad that had just shed its skin. Her personal maid Feitsue had come down with the exact same symptoms. Rumors spread like wildfire through the mansion. People whispered that they'd been cursed by Zhong-san's vengeful ghost, come back to haunt them after being beaten to death. Panic swept through the Xie mansion. No one dared to come near my courtyard anymore. No one except Xieshuren. He came to sit with me every day, often spending hours staring blankly at the magnolia trees in the courtyard. Yunshi, I'm so miserable. Wanqing is so sick. She screams and cries all day long, refusing to see anyone. I've even summoned the imperial physicians, but her condition just keeps getting worse. My father-in-law is furious with me. He blames me for not taking good care of his daughter. Xieshuren picked up his wine cup, draining it in one gulp. I'd always hated reading those stories where 2 women fought tooth and nail over one man, the legal wife fighting the concubine fighting the maids, all of them scrambling for a man's favor, turning themselves into bitter, twisted versions of their former selves. In the end, the women were left broken, injured, or dead, while the man, he got promoted, married a new, pretty wife. At best, he'd stand under the moon during festivals, drinking a cup of wine, reciting a few sappy poems to mourn his lost loves. Isn't it strange? Whether in stories or in real life, the women always ended up hurt. I didn't like that, I never had. So I left Xieshuren a little gift, a very special type of GU. I called it the 9 nether GU. They say the underworld has 18 levels. The 9th level, the deepest, darkest, most terrifying one, is known as the 9 nether. Those infected with the 9 nether GU forget all things that bring them joy, left only with memories of pain, both mental and physical. Every injury they ever sustained since childhood replays itself in their body, over and over again, without pause, and yet, not a single mark shows on their skin. What a pity, though. Xieshuren had been spoiled and coddled his entire life. He'd never suffered so much as a serious scrape. So I had no choice but to add a dose of heart-eating GU to the mix. Yunshi, tell me, where did that bastard Zhong-san touch you? You smiled at him, didn't you? If you hadn't smiled at him, why would he have targeted you, and no one else? I stared at him in genuine surprise. I'd never thought Xieshuren would care so deeply about such a trivial thing. When the 9 nether GU and heart-eating GU mix, they have another side effect. The victim falls madly, obsessively in love with the caster. The deeper their love, the more excruciating the heart-eating GU's pain becomes. In the end, they die on the day they love you the most. But Xieshuren's love was laughable, twisted, selfish, and utterly boring. Truly, it was also tedious. I decided to leave Chang'an. Before I went, I thought I'd pay my old friends a visit. Oh, but Dooku didn't need a visit. She'd already starved to death, her swollen tongue unable to swallow even a drop of water. Madame Liu didn't need one either. She lay in bed, barely breathing, too weak to even speak. So I slung a bundle over my shoulder and snuck over to Yi Wanqing's courtyard. Yi Wanqing had always loved luxury. Even her windows were made of the finest colored glaze. Sunlight filtering through them would cast a dazzling rainbow of light across the bluestone floors. But now, those beautiful windows were covered with thick cotton cloth, sealing the room off from the world, making it look like nothing more than a giant coffin. Yi Wanqing huddled in the corner of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, so thin she looked like she might break at any moment. When I slipped into her room in the dead of night, she didn't even scream. I walked over and gave her shoulder a gentle shake. Yi Wanqing, I've come to see you. Yi Wanqing jolted like she'd been stabbed, her voice shrill with terror. It's you, you evil witch. I shook my head, sighing softly. Why was Yi Wanqing just like Dooku and Madame Liu? I never liked killing. If only they'd shown me even the smallest shred of kindness. You're happy now, aren't you? Yi Wanqing shrieked, her voice cracking. Happy that my face is ruined, but even if I'm disfigured, you'll never have Shuren, never. His mine. Mine alone. All women who try to steal him deserve to die. Yi Wanqing lunged at me suddenly, her fingers outstretched, clawing for my throat. Mad woman. I rolled sideways, pinning her to the bed, and slapped her hard across the face, once, twice. The sound echoed through the silent room. Yi Wanqing's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted dead away. Ever since she'd been infected with my toad GU, she'd refused to eat or sleep, her body wasting away to nothing. I patted her cheek. But she didn't stir. Oh well, I'd better leave before dawn broke. Before I left the Xie mansion, I wrote Xieshuren a letter. I told him I'd been miserable in Chang'an, that I missed my home in western Sichuan, that I'd decided to go back. I lied and said I'd had a fiancé there once. Now that I'd tasted the bitterness of life in the mansion, I wrote, I wanted to find him again. The Imperial Palace examination was only a month away, with his father breathing down his neck, forcing him to study day and night. He'd never be able to come after me right away, so I traveled slowly back to western Sichuan, stopping to admire the mountains and rivers along the way, taking my time. I owned a small courtyard there, the very place where I'd taken Xieshuren in all those years ago. But when I finally arrived, I saw thin tendrils of smoke curling up from the chimney. Xieshuren was there. He'd gotten to western Sichuan before me. When he saw me, he went wild with rage and relief, charging at me like a madman. Jiang Yunqi, how dare you leave me? How dare you? Where is he? Where's that lover of yours? Tell me. The fiancé, of course, had been a lie. I smiled, reaching out to press my hand against his chest. Does it hurt? Siesharan nodded frantically, then shook his head just as violently, pulling me into a crushing embrace. Yunshi, don't leave me. Please don't leave me. I'll endure anything, any pain, any humiliation, as long as you stay. I tilted my head up, studying his face carefully. He'd lost so much weight, his cheekbones jutted out sharply, his eyes sunken into dark hollows, faint blue circles beneath them. His eyes were bloodshot, crisscrossed with tiny red veins, and his hands trembled as he held me. The heart-eating GU was almost ready to burst out of his body. It seemed today would be Siesharan's last day on earth. Siesharan, come with me. He clung to my hand tightly every step of the way. As if afraid I'd vanish into thin air if he let go, I led him to the back hill of the village, winding past 2 groves of trees until we reached a small cemetery. 3 tombstones stood there, neat and orderly. Siesharan stared at them, confused. The heart-eating GU flared up violently then, a wave of agony crashing over him, sweat beaded on his forehead, his face turning ashen with pain. It must have been quite a journey for him, from Chang'an all the way to western Sichuan. Poor thing. Siesharan, I said softly, you kept asking about my fiancé. I pointed at the tombstones. I never had a fiancé, but I did have 3 husbands once. You were the 4th. Siesharan's eyes widened in horror, his face draining of all color. What did you say? I pulled a handkerchief out of my sleeve, gently wiping the dust off the tombstones. They were all just like you, I said, my voice calm and steady. They all loved to lie to me. I looked at him, tilting my head to the side. Tell me, why do men always lie? Siesharan didn't answer. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he crumpled to the ground with a soft thud. A moment later, a bright red worm crawled slowly out of his open mouth. The heart-eating GU, fat and bloated from feeding on his heart for so long. I reached out and picked it up, closing my fingers around it gently. A sigh of contentment escaped my lips. My life-bound GU was called the Beauty GU. It fed on heart-eating GU, and the more it ate, the more beautiful I became. I'd been waiting 2 years for this particular heart-eating GU to ripen. I didn't spare Siesharan another glance. I stood up, walked back to the courtyard, grabbed a hoe, and returned to the hill. Before long, a 4th, unmarked tombstone stood among the trees. Winter turned to spring, and the magnolia blossoms on White Cloud Mountain in our town bloomed once again, covering the hillsides in a blanket of white. Every year at this time, scholars from all over the country would come to visit, to write poems on the temple walls, to debate Buddhism with the abbot. The mountain would be filled with laughter and chatter. I stood behind a grove of trees, wearing a simple, elegant dress the color of moonlight, waiting quietly. Ouch! Before long, a clear male voice rang out from the path ahead. I picked up my bamboo basket and walked over. A young scholar dressed in fine silk robes was crouching on the ground, his brow furrowed in pain. A steel jaw trap clamped down on his ankle, his white sock stained with blood. I gasped, rushing over to him, my voice soft with concern. My lord, are you all right? The scholar stared at me, dumbfounded. A faint flush rose to his cheeks. I am fine, it's nothing. I tilted my head up, looking at him through my lashes, my expression shy and demure. My home is in the village at the foot of the mountain. Don't worry, my lord, I'll take you to a doctor. I slipped my arm around his waist, helping him to his feet, and slowly led him down the mountain. Behind us, the white magnolia petals fell gently to the ground, covering the path in a carpet of snow. Would you like me to polish this translated ending to make it more vivid and dramatic for your social media promotion needs?